The following audio presentation includes frequent use of the term spunk. Unless otherwise stated, this is the official acronym of the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, and all mishearings and subsequent offense taken by this term are to be directed to Sony Pictures Entertainment. Is anybody listening after that? The players and Madam Web are covering us in spunk, and we're taking someone's daughter and someone's son to the promised land. I'm Van Connor.
And I'm Adam Ball, and this is Off Screen, your 7-day guide to everything movies.
Boom!
Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. So, as always, we've got some fresh movies to look at this week with Van. So, we are going to start with Someone's Daughter. Now, I don't know a lot about this, Van, apart from it looks like it's quite a deep kind of movie.
Oh, and then some. So it's someone's daughter, someone's son. And it's a documentary from Lorna Tucker, who does, writer-director Lorna Tucker, who also appears on camera here as well. This is an examination of the lives of people in homeless Britain. The homeless denizens of contemporary Britain, how they've come to be in that situation, how they just live their lives, what solutions we can find to the rising number of homeless people in the UK at this time, and forces Lorna Tucker at one point to revisit her own history, having been homeless in her teens. I've got a clip for you. Have a listen to the tone of this.
I want everyone to believe that we can end homelessness in 10 years. And in order to do that, we need to question our assumptions, be aware that we can do a lot more in terms of taking advantage from technological developments to improve the data we have. We then also need to move from trying to fix people to just listening to what they want and their hopes and facilitating them achieving those goals. We also need to support people doing hard work day in, day out on the front line to do their jobs even better.
So she used to be homeless, Lorna Tucker, and she's not anymore. So does this go into how she came out of homelessness as well?
It does get brought up. Like, it's a very brief interview. I will explain. So one of the interviewees through the course of the movie is it Sir John Bird, who was the founder of The Big Issue, who himself had grown up been a rough sleeper at some point, while growing up, and had then came up with the idea and founded The Big Issue. We get through him. He actually brings up, whilst in an interview, he says, "Oh, look what we've got. This is from when we first started running the missing people's pages in The Big Issue." He says, "Look who I found." He shows the director her own listing, like from back 25 years ago. Like, have you seen our daughter, sister, etc. In there, and it's her, and she says that this was a huge turning point for me. It's a really moving documentary. It's obviously harrowing, and the exploration of the lives of the people that you meet along the way, who, as tell us at one point, we're all potentially two paychecks away from this at any given point in this day and age. The idea that you can literally have 2 bad months and your life can be absolutely destroyed, and it's a really compelling, of course, quite urgent documentary as well. It's really something worth looking into. There was a lot of exploration for me of the Big Issue as well, how they induct someone into selling The Big Issue, like how they explain to them, give them the routes and set them up. That was something I'd actually not seen, believe it or not, in a documentary before. Even like a Channel 5 type one, where it seems the kind of thing gets brought up. But I'd never seen that either. But it is the people you meet along the way. We meet this one gentleman who spent 18 years homeless and was now actually an activist and a campaign worker for homeless charities in his life now. And he takes us through his story and his life. It's really something. I think this would, I'll be honest with you, probably get a tear or two out of you, Adam, I think.
I was going to say, I think this would probably be something I'd really be intrigued to watch, because I've always said that you're 2 paychecks away from being in the same position as some of these poor homeless people. And, we could be in that position quite easily.
Very true, as the documentary very quickly establishes. And I will say as well, as great as the documentary is, there's a bit at the end where I had to groan a little. And it's a great land for them. It's a great land for Lorna Tucker, but it kind of just feels a bit saccharine to have a theme song by Bryan Adams. And yeah, your look, your very confused look right there. Yeah, and it's obvious that he's done this as as an activist thing. He's like he's contributed this song form, which is called "Somebody's Daughter, Somebody's Son," and it's every bit as cringe as it sounds. I know this is neither here nor there. I'm just saying it. I was really going with the documentary, and then the song at the end felt a bit "We Are the World." You know what I mean?
Oh, goodness. That's a little bit cheesy, I suppose, in that respect. Does this follow many people's journey with homelessness, or is it just hers that you're following?
No, we don't really. The director's own story is only brought up very briefly. To be honest, it is the wider. It's the wider examination of the arguments. It's like, what is life like sleeping rough in 21st century Britain? How does that go? What are the risks? What are you subjecting yourself to? And then also looking at what the solutions are to it. I think it's John Bird says at one point that you could solve homelessness in Britain. But the problem is you don't have to. It's not really about solving homelessness. It is about all the BS that goes with it, meaning the politics that go alongside it, and where funding gets pulled, and how organisations that decades previous would always ensure that you had somewhere to sleep that night, which simply aren't there anymore. That they've not survived through, recent economic times. That they are just part of. There's something that's just been done away with during austerity. And I say it's the kind of thing where if you're a filthy liberal like myself anyway, and you tend to have your face buried in a James O'Brien podcast all day every day anyway, then it's the kind of thing that's not something that isn't on your mind anyway. But it is quite a stirring look at these issues.
So is it going to make people empathise watching this, or is it going to make people angry?
Oh, empathise and angry. Absolutely. Equal measure. You will empathise with everyone you meet in this. You will also be very angry. There's a sequence I really enjoyed, actually, in which, and I think it shows a difference in generation between like John Bird, the Big Issue founder, where he meets several young people in a sort of counselling and training program for, I think it is for working for the Big Issue. And they have completely wildly different political views on the same issue of what to do with the homeless, of how to end homelessness, and and it's fun watching John Bird, in a strange sense, have to reel back and walk back his words really quickly to try and agree with them in a strange way. Like they bring up mental health a lot, for instance, because they are much younger, and he kind of has to reel back. Like, yes, I meant that too. It's a very fascinating documentary on several levels.
Well, Someone's Daughter, Someone's Son is out in cinemas from today, if you want to go and see it yourself. Right, still to come, we're going to look at Madam Web shortly, The Promised Land, but next we're going to see what Van thought of Players, so stay right where you are. Hello and welcome back to Off Screen then. Let's move straight on to our next movie. So this one is called Players. It's out in cinemas from today. Now, I've read the synopsis and I kind of find it quite hard to understand what on earth it's about from the synopsis that I've read, really.
Okay, weird thing. First of all, I messed up on the script there. This is actually on Netflix, and it's from 2 days ago. So I should have updated that. But yeah. So this is a new comedy directed by Trish C. It's got a screenplay by Whit Anderson, who was a writer on Ocean's 8 a few years ago, the Anne Hathaway sequel. Anne Hathaway, who else was in Ocean's 8? It'll come to me. Sandra Bullock, that was it. So writer on that. And it stars Gina Rodriguez from TV's Jane the Virgin, which I have never watched. I only know Gina Rodriguez as like a small bit player in a couple of movies like Deepwater Horizon. Okay, and she is the ultimate player. She and her friends run plays. You see, she is Mac, a 33-year-old sports journalist, writing for like an actual newspaper. This was so clearly concocted by someone so much older than the characters in this movie. So Mac is just the sexiest, coolest, most badass female sports reporter you've ever met. So of course, because she's a female sports reporter, she has like a cadre of bros. One of whom is played by Rachel Weisz's now adult son from About a Boy, whose name I can never remember. Another is Damon Wayans Jr. as a third as well. And they run plays together, meaning like NFL sports plays. Like a offensive strategy in a football game.
Okay, that's where it went wrong for me in the synopsis. I don't know what that means.
Okay. So, but they use it entirely for the purposes of getting laid. Which means that if you gender flip this movie, it becomes something like I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, which is just an incredible thought to have in 2024. Anyway, so what basically she does is she will like be a prop girlfriend and like stage a fight in a bar, for instance, with her mate and make him look like a chivalrous hero, and she's the problem, like, you know, things like that, in order to basically just help her mate score. And they're all basically, it's kind of a setup, a train wreck in a strange way as well, but bit more.
She's their wingman,
ultimate wingman. Yeah, she's Barney Stinson. That's who she is. She's Barney Stinson. And then one day she meets at work Tom Ellis, Lucifer himself, you know, from the TV Netflix series Lucifer, on which which broadcasts alongside this movie on Netflix. He's then like the most eligible bachelor in the city, and she falls for him, and she can run a play, she can land him, she can sleep with him, but then she decides she wants to keep him. So the con is on. The game is afoot to set the ultimate play, this time not just for a one-nighter, but for an all-nighter. Have a listen.
Who is he again?
That's Nick Russell.
He's New York's most eligible bachelor.
He's a war reporter. And he saved an actual orphan from an actual burning building.
Was it burning?
Collapsing?
Sinking?
Maybe just like a bad building somewhere.
What's wrong with you?
I might like him.
Like him?
I'm 33 and I want an adult.
Want this dude? Let's get him. Need to play, guys. What do we got?
We've never played for keeps.
Well, then, let's Moneyball this baby.
I'm so hard for all of this right now.
So does this have kind of comedy moments to it? Because looking at the synopsis and looking at the front cover of the movie, it looks like there's a bit of fun to be had with this as well.
I know, it's just straight up old school rom-com. Like, it's a proper, like, we made these every month in the 90s and released them in cinemas, and they made, like, 75 mil and starred Matthew Broderick and Meg Ryan rom-com. You know, it's a proper one of those. But it just doesn't happen to be a very good one, but it is one of those.
Oh, that's a shame. I quite like the premise of it, actually, now that you've told me.
There's a couple of chucklesome moments in it and a couple of the supporting performances. I mean, to be honest, Tom Ellis is the most likeable part of the entire movie. Everything else about this seems like, honestly, it seems like the deranged rom-com fantasy of like a 50-year-old white man. Like, in a very strange way. Like, it's the only way I can describe it. Like, it seems to be this kind of idealized, you know, aesthetic, and everybody in it is a very specific kind of person, but a very specific iteration of that. I feel like a lot of this is BuzzFeed and Wikipedia reading, and not actually, you know, living out in the world. There's a fair bit of that on there. But Rodriguez is a likable enough rom-com sort of lead. She's not particularly sparkling. She's no J-Lo. You know, she's no Meg Ryan. She's not one of the greats. She's no Kathleen Turner, sir. I'll have you know.
Is it predictable, though? Because these
Yes.
kind of rom-coms, I was about to say, these kind of rom-coms, that you're sat there going, I know what's going to happen.
I mean, it's absolutely predictable. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen the movie. I know this because I saw the trailer. I was like, because we were going to review something else, obviously, we chose this at the last minute because it was easier. You know, it was easier than getting hold of the other movie. But also, I made that call under duress because I was reviewing the trailer for it, and I just thought, oh no, I don't know if I've got this in me. Like, this seems like sludge, and at times it comes perilously close. Like, it really it wades into the thick treacly tar of absolute bilge quite often. But Tom Ellis is really likable in it, and he steals every moment he's in. The movie makes incredibly little sense as it goes on, as far as the sort of rom-com element goes. Like, you said it was predictable. Yes, it is if you've seen the trailer, because you would know based on the trailer exactly what they wheel out for the third act of this, apropos of nothing. And even then, as soon as it's introduced, you're like, okay, well, now I know exactly how the rest of this is going to go. But within its internal cast, there's moments to it that kind of work. You know, I do think a lot of the sort of banter with the mates is faintly amusing. You know, I kind of like that. There's the one character, I'm going to have to look up the actor's name, the About a Boy guy. About a Boy guy is Augustus Prew, that's it. I did know that. Augustus Prew and his brother make up the other two friends outside of Damon Wayans Jr. And it's it's quite a neat brotherly back and forth, but it's got a weirdness to it that I kind of appreciate. So,
well, yeah, I was going to say, with a cheesy rom-com like this, normally comes a soundtrack of some sort. Is there one?
Not really much of one. No, I mean, there's an opera at one point. If that's going to be, there's literally an opera sequence. But yeah, no, not really one. I wouldn't. No.
You normally get one big hit, don't you? Like Bryan Adams' "Everything I Do It For You" from Robin Hood, you know. But none of that in this. And clearly, you know, it's on Netflix, isn't it? So they're clearly not expecting billions at the box office.
No, the only reason this exists is so that when it concludes after like an hour and 45 minutes, it's mercifully short, like 105 minutes. The only reason is so that when it gets to, you know, 1 hour 41 and the credits start, they can roll up, you know, we might suggest that you watch Lucifer. Here's 7 seasons of it. That's purely why this exists, as a sort of marketing ad for, look, we have more content starring the Hunky Man. Which I'm not averse to. Fair play. You know, I don't begrudge Tom Ellis any of his hunky success. Good for him. That man's got it going on. But yeah, that's literally what this movie is. This is not challenging in any way, shape, or form. Even fans of like Damon Wayans Jr. in Happy Endings, which is a series I really enjoy. I'm a fan of him from that, and even that part of me wasn't particularly engaged by this because it's kind of a bland, flavorless sidekick role until it's not. But it just doesn't really work for him.
Quite an expensive marketing tool, I would say, exactly, on this front. Well, there you go. If you fancy watching this rom-com, Players is on Netflix from now. You can watch it from the comfort of your own home, which means you can switch it off if you don't like it and not be worried about it. Okay, still to come, The Promised Land in a moment. Next, though, we're going to look at Madam Web. Is it Madam or Madame? I don't know.
I think it's Madam. I think it's Madam.
We'll go with Madam. We'll see what Van thought next. Stay there.
Right, well, I am ready to go if you are. So,
ready.
Over to you.
Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. 2 movies left, The Promised Land in a moment, but let's talk about Madam Web. And I know that, Van, you have been quite excited to talk to me about Madam Web.
My friend, there is a new Spunk movie in cinemas. The Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters is back. That's what they called it. They named it that. They chose to call their cinematic universe Spunk. Like S-P-U-M-C. They chose to do this. And the minute they decided to do that, the minute those sentient adults made that decision, decided, we are the home of Spunk now, that was the moment that I too pledged myself, for I would have to see everything they ever made. Very enthusiastically. So we've had, this is the Spider-Man-less series of Spider-Man spin-offs. You know, like Venom? You know, it's like, it's a Spider-Man movie, but it doesn't have Spider-Man in it. These are the ones that are actually made by Sony. So they're in association with Marvel, but they're not really Marvel movies, you know what I mean? They're only doing this so that they're allowed to use Tom Holland as Spider-Man. That's the whole thing. So this is one of the supporting. This centers around one of the supporting characters from, to most people, I think, from Spider-Man the Animated Series, towards the very end of 1994's Spider-Man the Animated Series, Madam Web, who has always been depicted as sort of an elderly lady, but is realised naturally enough for the screen as a 30-year-old played by Dakota Johnson, because that's a choice. Yeah, I mean, Helen Mirren would have been interesting casting. But Dakota Johnson's cool. Yeah, sure. Anyway, so in this iteration, she is Cassie Webb. Cassie Webb is a 30-year-old paramedic in New York. She's got kind of a detachment style. Like, she doesn't really like receiving gratitude from patients, she says, things like that. All of which annoys her bestie, her platonic bestie and partner on the rig, a paramedic named Ben Parker. That's going to come up. He's played by Adam Scott. And anyway, so one day they're on a job, and she has an accident. She finds herself drowned inside a cab, like whilst rescuing a woman, and she survives a near-death experience and finds herself with the ability to see the future, almost like Spider Sense, but a bit more prolonged. In fact, if we're being specific about it, it's the exact same power set that Nicolas Cage has in the movie Next, itself an adaptation of a Philip K. Dick book. But with this ability to see the future comes the realization that her mum, who died in childbirth with her, happened to be in the Peruvian Amazon researching spiders. And there's a whole big deal around it. Yeah, you're starting to see it now, aren't you? You're starting to see it. And this series of future visions, Final Destination style, because that's how they seem to play, like Final Destination flashes, show her 3 young women who all are destined to have Spider-Man-like powers themselves and become different characters from the Spider-Verse, being hunted and picked off by this murderous assassin who happens to look a lot like an evil version of Spider-Man. This movie, by the way, is set in 2003. All of this is going to come up after this clip.
A week ago, I spent my life racing against time,
I'm gonna help you out today, okay?
trying to save people who were running out of it.
Jesse!
Until one moment changed everything.
Come on! Welcome back to the land of the living.
I don't understand what's happening.
I've been having visions.
I knew he was gonna die.
I think I'm seeing the future.
New York City's a whole new level of crazy these days.
What do you want from me?
I must say, I do love the fact that her surname just happens to be Webb for a start.
That's the bit you settle on. That's the everything I just said. That's the bit.
That's why it's been playing on my mind since you started. Like, how's she got a surname Webb?
Fair enough, my friend. That's just not the bit I thought you'd fixate on at all. This is just hilariously bad, but in all the most enjoyable of ways. Like it's a 2-star movie. Like it's a 2-star movie, and most of those stars are going to if the academic stars are going to the pretty sterling direction of S.J. Clarkson. Who's been on Game of Thrones. I think was attached to the 4th Star Trek Abrams movie at one point, but isn't now. And so it is, by default, the best directed of all of the Spunk movies, of all of these Sony Pictures Universe and Marvel characters movies. So it's better directed than Ruben Fleischer gave Venom. It's definitely better directed than Andy Serkis gave Venom and Carnage, although that was not awful. And I can't even remember. Oh, it was Daniel Espinosa, I think, who did Morbius, which I never need to see again. It's the best directed one of these. It is also just flat out the best one. It's the best movie out of all of the Spunk movies, out of all of the Sony Pictures Universe and Marvel characters movies. It's the best Spunk movie. It's better than Venom and Venom 2, and it's definitely better than Morbius. I will also toss out a few more comparison points for you on a similar pitch, because this is trying to go for a bit more of a teen horror vibe, but it also has that 2003 setting, and it definitely has a 2003 tone and sensibility. It basically plays like Elektra if Elektra stopped every 10 minutes that there could be Final Destination and then resume. Like, it's that, in a sense, but kind of with a bit of the aesthetic of, like, New Mutants. It is absolute bilge. It's complete shash. About the point that they start introducing Ben Parker's sister-in-law, Mary, played by Emma Roberts, who's heavily pregnant, and they all have this conversation about how Ben now is going to be a cool uncle, Uncle Ben, and he's going to have all of the fun and none of the responsibility. That's a line they use, and you're just like, this is so just brilliantly bad. I feel like if you'd done this intentionally, it wouldn't have been this fun. You've just accidentally done this, and it's amazing. Hats off to you. This is just... And then you've got Dakota Johnson in the lead, who's, I think, just taking it way too seriously and leaning very heavily into that. She's committed a bit too hard to it in a strange way, but she permanently just looks confused. Like, her character's permanent state is just to be like, I don't understand. How can insert plot point here be possible? And that's it. You get like that over and over again until the third act, when it just goes. I mean, it's a spectacularly awfully written movie. It should be pointed out before I start nitpicking on Dakota Johnson, because her character gets the brunt of most of this. The movie is so terribly written that at one point she just drives overnight to Peru from New York City. Just drives to Peru, to find out what happened to Mum. Just drives to Peru. That's just a thing that happens. I mean, I don't know if she caught a plane, but she got in a car, she drove off shot, out the frame. And then the next sequence, she was in Peru. Okay, she drove to Peru and then back. And she does all this in the space of like a day, it seems. This is what Dakota Johnson is having to seriously commit her way through, and it's the only reason any of it vaguely lands in a sort of enjoyably bad way. You know what kind of movie I'm talking about?
Kind of, yeah. To me, it just seems very like it doesn't fit together at all.
Well, no, there is also another element to it that's quite fun. But you have got Tahar Rahim as a pretty engaging enough villain. Although, it just seems to be like the Olivier Martinez role from 2003, and you wonder, like, have we just stopped hiring Olivier Martinez now? Are we just, like, concerned he's just going to, like, make everyone cheat on their boyfriends? Is that just, like, his shtick? Like, he's now been run out of the industry? Because that is who Tahar Rahim is basically playing here. Like an immortal who's got Spider-Man powers. He's actually got like a black Spider-Man suit with, it's like the inverted colour scheme. He's decently enough though. You've got his sort of storyline going on. He's got like Shoshana from Girls as his guy in the chair as well, in the sort of Ned role from Homecoming kind of thing. And then you've got the three young girls themselves, who I think is Isabella Merced is one. I need to look it up on IMDb. Isabella Merced is one of the trio. You've then got what's her name? Hottest woman on the planet. Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney is one of the three. Yeah, Sydney Sweeney is one of the three as well. And Celeste O'Connor. It was the O'Connor. I had Celeste, and I was just going Daphne and Celeste in my head, because clearly I'm thrown back to like 2003. So Celeste O'Connor, Isabella Merced, and Sydney Sweeney as the sort of basically teenagers. They're basically the sort of like teenage characters who she has to sort of protect in this Final Destination-like way. It's basically a Spider-Man Final Destination movie, but nowhere near as good as either a Spider-Man movie or a Final Destination movie. But there's some vague laughs. There are times when I genuinely laughed out loud at how sort of enjoyably terrible some of it was. It's predictable as toffee. The third act, because of how badly written it is, just makes absolutely no sense. And then the final reel. Oh my God, the final reel. I was clapping like a baby seal through the final reel of this, because it just nose-dove straight into spectacucamp. There's no other way to describe it. It became the Spider-Man animated series from 1994, brought to life regardless of context or reality. It was exactly like it, and I was just clapping like a baby seal. I was like, what a wonderfully terrible decision to have made. I salute you. And that is Madam Web, the best of the Spunk movies.
Well, there you have it. I'm still laughing at Uncle Ben, because all I'll be able to think of is sweet and sour chicken and microwave rice.
Yeah, but he's Adam Scott now. You know what that means as well? It means, since Adam Scott is Uncle Ben in like 2003, right? We know what Marissa Tomei looked like in 2003, because obviously his girlfriend, who he mentions meeting like in the background at one point, I think I've met someone. That's all you get. It's not like a cameo by a de-aged Marissa Tomei or anything. But clearly she's meant to be the Homecoming. This is the Tom Holland verse. So this is like positing it as if Tom Holland is. The age doesn't quite make sense. He'd still be 13 in Civil War. But that means Uncle Ben and Aunt May were Adam Scott looking like he does now, and Marissa Tomei looking at how she did in 2003, which is basically Marissa Tomei now. Now, that is the hottest couple that's ever lived. That is, woof, isn't it? That's got to be the hottest couple that ever lived. That's why they released this on Valentine's Day. That's why Madam Web was in cinemas on Valentine's Day, because they knew they were setting fiction and canon up for the hottest couple that ever lived. I give you Adam Scott and Marissa Tomei. Boom, they did it, ladies and gentlemen. The Spunk has achieved something.
Well, there you go. You can go and watch it yourself if you like. Madam Web is in cinemas already, so go and enjoy it this weekend if you fancy. Right, we have got one last ride. We're going to look at The Promised Land. We'll see what Van thought of that one in just a sec. Hello and welcome back to Offscreen for one last ride then. Let's look and dive straight into The Promised Land, which is out in cinemas from today. Another one I know nothing about, apart from it's got that dude in from Casino Royale. That's all I know.
That dude from Casino Royale. Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, in fact, to certain ones of my friends and myself, the man is to be referred to simply as Mads. You mention Mads, and you're in good company with my social circle, because we're all mad about Mads. We love Mads Mikkelsen.
I like him. I agree.
One of my very favourites of his was actually Another Round, one of his more recent ones, Another Round, about the teachers who experiment with constant drinking to see if you can biologically improve your life. Chris Rock is now directing the English language remake. This is his latest actor-director team-up with Nikolai Arcel. It is called The Promised Land, or in its native tongue, Bastarden, which translates to, well, yes, you can guess, and it does mean that the B word in a biological way rather than a misbehaving way. So it is referring to his parentage in a sense. So I think this is based on a novel, I think, called The Captain and Anna Barbara, I believe it's called. Mads, he's just going to be Mads. I'm sorry, he is just Mads. Mads stars as Captain Ludwig Karlen, I believe his name is, who is a Danish soldier in the German army, who is basically afforded the opportunity to go into the Jutland Heath, the inhospitable, very bitter and biting Jutland Heath, where nothing's supposed to be difficult to grow anything, in order to set up a farm and the first colony for the German king. And no sooner has he arrived, though, and all he asks for in exchange for this is a title of nobility and all the stature that comes with it, because it turns out that he is an aspiring elite. His dream is simply to enter high society for reasons that he's not forthcoming about. No sooner has he arrived in the Jutland Heath, however, than Mads finds himself fallen foul of the local crime boss, the local corrupt elite, a snooty land baron lord who has ties to the king loosely, but really has no time for the king, and has determined that all of the heath is his and his alone, and the only way that Mads can be allowed, king or no king, to establish this colony is if he signs a contract that agrees to give said land baron 50% of all his earnings for future, and he just becomes effectively a serf, which of course Mads has no time for. Also doesn't help, that land baron has a really saucy fiancée in waiting, and she just needs the right man of nobility to sway her eye. So yeah, all of this is subtitled, by the way, sorry to break it to you. You were in on that, weren't you? I can see you were in on that as well.
I was. You just ruined it at the end then with the whole subtitle thing. Although I am watching the trailer on loop while we're chatting, and the cinematography in it does look very Lord of the Rings.
It almost does, doesn't it? It's very otherworldly. It does seem to take place in its own universe. There's a use of fog, for instance, and because of the way they have to burn the heath to make anything grow, for instance, there's some wonderful sequences of basically the fog on fire in the background and surrounding them and enveloping them, like how they are then trapped within this burning heath. Not literally, but it sort of appears like visually like they are, and sort of like in the emotion of the moment. It's a great movie. It's really, really good. I was taken in like minute one anyway. Mads Mikkelsen has screen presence like very, very few actors.
Yeah,
he is one of my favorite like working actors today. Is Mads? It's like Mads, Tim Roth, Paulie G. Those are my boys. Like, I'll throw some love out for Ron Perlman. He has terrible taste in projects, but when Ron Perlman commits, he commits. But no, Mads brings it and then some here. The story, it takes you. It's quite an epic. It is quite an epic story. There seems to be quite a scale to it, even though it is just all largely set on this farm. Even though there's like 2 or 3 sequences that take place elsewhere, like story elements that take place elsewhere, but it's largely just on this farm and dealing with everything on this farm, or in the woods surrounding it. And it's great. The performances are there. Directorial, it's really tight. Story had me just gripped. I was in there. Sort of had an inkling where it was going, though it didn't quite. And I was brought into just this, how immersive this felt. Like, I really felt like I was getting into. I wish I could have watched it on an Apple Vision Pro. You know what I mean? So I could have like had it virtually, like all around me. Like I could have VR'd this. Like this feels like it would have been a great experience. But there is something like a grand Shakespearean sort of tragedy to it in a sense, but it's not necessarily tragic. The characters are all really fun as well. I really like Anna Barbara and Johannes. Are initially start out as a married couple who are on the run from the land baron, set up and get work with Mads. And say it's a really engaging, really solid story. I'd say, imagine somewhere between Nightingale and Field of Dreams, if you can imagine that, like really hard-bitten revenge horror, and Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. Imagine those as a period piece in 1755 Denmark. You know? As you do.
What a combination.
Yeah.
It does look like it has some really incredible fight scenes, though, from the trailer that's kind of whipping around at the moment.
Well, that's why I made that Nightingale comparison with just cause. It gets quite brutal.
Yeah.
It's quite a harsh, quite brutal film at times, but it's not like a horrifically over-the-top, end-to-end violent one. I think it is a character drama after all, but with this sort of thriller elements between the land baron, and it does go a bit whimsy, kind of Mission Impossible towards the end, but in a way that's still vaguely believable.
Well, The Promised Land, if you want to go and see it, well, you can, because it's out in cinemas from today, so go and make your own mind up if you wish. Now, let's look ahead to next week. We got 6 movies to talk about next week.
Well, I mean, we've got 6 choices of movies. I don't know what we're actually going to review, but I mean, I know one. I mean, next week we have the documentary A Wolf Pack called Ernesto. We've got a new one with Ian McShane. I've got a link for you for that, for Ian McShane for American Star, which I think is, I don't know if it's set up as a kind of a sexy beast type thing. There is the, Jessica Chastain. I was going to call her Anne something for some reason. Jessica Chastain, Peter Sarsgaard drama Memory is next week as well. One that we were going to do a few weeks ago, but then it got pushed back at the last minute. It got pushed back by 3 weeks. Out of Darkness, which is a sort of like savage man survival tale, I think. Shoshana is next week as well, which I've just had a link through. I know very little about that.
That sounds like a Disney animated film.
Does it just? And one that I have actually seen, and Olivia Colman turned up for our screening. We're so thrilled. Olivia Colman, Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley were right in front of me the other night as we sat down to watch Wicked Little Letters, based on the Poison Pen scandal of yesteryear, apparently based on true events. And Olivia Colman kind of just learned to swear. I mean, Olivia Colman is one of history's great swearers, so the irony is lost on no one. But that's Wicked Little Letters, which I will get to talk to you about next week.
Loads to look forward to. Well, that is all we've got time for this week on Off Screen. We will be back next week. Until then, I've been Adam Ball.
I've been Van Connor, and we shall return.